The manosphere has become the primary way vulnerable men adopt far-right political views. But has it actually benefited men? It certainly has hurt everybody else. Women, trans, and queer people suffer threats to their rights, safety, and personal autonomy as a direct result of this backlash against gender equality and wider acceptance of non-traditional forms of gender expression. This, of course, stands in stark contradiction to the narrative of supremacist ideologies, as they believe themselves to be simultaneously superior to, yet constantly victimized by the demonized other. I'm calling their bluff. Has the red pill actively helped or harmed men? Has the manosphere demonstrated sensitivity to male pain and male loneliness in a healthy and productive way? Would you describe the contribution anti-feminists make to discussions regarding men's mental health as consistently supportive and positive? Or have they provoked delusional, bigoted grievances for their own ideological and financial benefit, warping men's pain into politically weaponized anger and hatred, assuring men that they need not change or self-reflect, much less examine the ways boys are socialized under patriarchy, placing impossible, often contradictory expectations onto men, while they simultaneously reinforce the sexist, stereotypical gender roles that make male pain so dangerous? What have the apologists for patriarchy done to support men's mental health, emotional well-being, or to help men form and maintain mutually beneficial relationships with and a healthy viewpoint towards women? When has anti-feminism actually benefited decent men? I must also ask, when has the manosphere ever shown any sensitivity to women's pain? Or do feminists have a monopoly on compassion, empathy, understanding, and kindness? I have written countless pieces from a feminist standpoint attempting to empathize with and help the men that hate us, but no such attempts from the other side do the same. What is clear is that the exploitation of male pain has aided anti-feminist and regressive reactionary politics. Anti-feminism has been used to divide workers against themselves, painting this as a conflict of men versus women rather than people versus power and patriarchy, dividing us so we cannot unite against an owning class that is all too ready to profit from and take advantage of male pain, stoking grievance by assuring men of their natural superiority while they so clearly have nothing to show for it, aggravating their insecurities, making them easier prey for propaganda which conveniently deflects blame away from the wealthy and powerful. By replacing class struggle with what should have been a long-settled debate between either subjugation and patriarchy or liberation and gender equality, the owning class can continue to chip away at our rights and freedoms while impoverishing us as they consolidate wealth and power. As is common, if not necessary to reactionary thinking, anti-feminism is profoundly anti-intellectual, unempathetic, incurious, inflexible, and relies on confirmation bias and echo chambers to prop up a worldview that drastically contradicts reality in obvious and easily demonstrable ways at every turn. This is how men can, for example, exist in a society they are fully aware was designed by and for men, where men have a stranglehold on every major position of power across all governments, organizations, institutions, and can hold dramatically more wealth, can be paid more for doing the same job with the same qualifications, disproportionately benefit from relationships with women in every measurable metric, and benefit from the unpaid domestic and caretaking work of women and the extra free time and better life this allots them. All of this can be clearly demonstrated by every data point and all the evidence available, spelled out to them in the simplest way, and they still reject their eyes, ears, friends, relatives, peers, facts, everything their offline reality tells them. It doesn't conform to the grievances they feel, which, mind you, are most often very real, but also tragically misdirected. For men vulnerable to conspiracy theories like the red pill, who base their value as a human being and potential romantic partner on wealth they don't have and can't get. And you'll see this kind of thinking repeatedly in my comments section, where men's feelings and personal experiences and struggles prove to them that men must be oppressed, but of course the experiences and struggles of women do not. This is especially true when speaking about anything women experience on a regular basis, but men do not. Men are not expected to appease the wrath of random women who regularly feel empowered to harass and demand sexual gratification from random men on the street. and are not accustomed to have their personal safety be in jeopardy if they do not find the perfect balance of being polite, but making clear that you are not interested without wounding her ego. Thus, men are not in the habit of trying to see things from a woman's viewpoint. Their personal safety, their lives do not depend on it on a regular basis. They are not used to this power imbalance. Men who fall into the trap of this type of self-centered, hyper-individualistic thinking, commonly encouraged by the anti-feminists of the manosphere, are so divorced from reality that they genuinely believe normal relationships and emotional or intellectual connection with women has become impossible. This stems from severe isolation and willingness to believe their failure to have a healthy, intimate relationship is not due to their emotional immaturity and failure to manage their negative feelings in healthy ways, but everyone else's fault, specifically every woman's fault. A common but incredibly transparent coping mechanism is to paint themselves as superior to men who have happy, healthy relationships with women, seeing the skills required to do so as unmanly, and expression of positive emotions as weakness, and believes showing kindness or consideration to any woman, ever, is humiliating because it's proof a man is being emotionally manipulated because sex and sexual attractiveness is the only thing of value real men should and can appreciate about women, according to the misogynist. The deeper men descend into this rabbit hole, the more they insulate themselves from any information or opinions that cast doubt on the false consciousness of extreme misogyny, ensuring the only women they interact with are those whom they pay to do so. This, along with the tendency of neoliberal capitalism to commodify every aspect of existence, reinforces their belief that all relationships are transactional. Women are shallow and will only love them for what they provide and never for who they are. And this justifies their view of women as objects to be bought and sold. Misogynists are uniquely susceptible to the dehumanizing influence of commodification. There are profits to be made in peddling solutions to the problems exacerbated by capitalism, where lonely, misogynistic men are loyal customers. Advertisers and propagandists dangle smiling women with dead eyes like a worm on a hook to sell their products, services, or message. Men may experience resentment towards women due to the power they feel this has over them. Feminists are impervious to this type of manipulation if they refuse to dehumanize women through objectification, and those with class consciousness can't help but notice the hook and recognize that being used as bait is not empowering, thus understanding that any resentment towards the objectified woman is misplaced. But only those who can see how both forms of exploitation work in tandem will truly appreciate why we must unite against our common enemy. Whether we are used, objectified, and only desired as bait, or manipulated and trapped as prey, an intersectional understanding of oppression reveals how blaming each other only ensures we remain exploited regardless of what role we play. Men lacking this understanding will have masculinity itself marketed to them. In a consumption-obsessed, patriarchal society that insists all masculine things are good and all good things are masculine, masculinity manifests much like an all-consuming addiction to those who fixate on it.
This form of masculinity does not make men stronger, nor does it give them the tools to cope with rejection, loneliness, shame, inadequacy. It punishes them for feeling any positive emotions, and when these unprocessed emotions mutate into rage, it gives them a target to punish and blame. Rather than achieving strength through growth, emotional maturity, and the resilience of strong social ties, patriarchal masculinity defines male superiority into existence by asserting that women and queer people are weak, to be loathed, lesser, training them to look down on everyone who isn't like them, as well as, in fact, especially the men who resist conforming to the mold of masculinity. Men tempted to allot a bit of headspace to nurture thoughts of rebellion against, or even in reform of, this suffocating mind prison, face the constant threat of emasculation, which would mean dire consequences, both social and personal, including but not limited to the loss of the foundational component of their identity, which has defined them even before they were born. Thus, men must be ever vigilant, lest they be judged as too queer or too feminine, which is the greatest insult, the lowliest, most disgusting, weak, pathetic, subhuman thing a man can be under patriarchy. Having to go through this hazing ritual of becoming a real man, labeling all who don't conform as queer or feminine, fosters both entitlement and hatred of women and people that defy gender and sexual norms. The prize men are promised for all this suffering and sacrifice is, of course, women. Access to our bodies, our labor, our emotional support. They expect that by giving up so much of who they were to the idol of the real man, that a woman will be just as willing to give up everything she is for him. These aren't men that celebrate independent, intelligent, opinionated, free women to be equal partners with. This goes against everything they were taught. A threat, the greatest threat to their superiority. So when few women are eager to be the compliant trad wives, supporting and affirming them in all that they do in a very one-sided way, and insisting on equality, well, we see the results now. Many men refuse to adapt and double down in their adherence to patriarchy. And they will find plenty of support for their view of women as mere accessories, conquests, trophies, among like-minded men, who assume that all women do, our very existence is to serve and to benefit men. So, when women demand all the things men have access to without having everything that doesn't fit the stereotype of masculinity mocked and burned away from them, men feel understandable anger, confusion, and bitter resentment. But they are targeting the wrong thing. And this is why, ultimately, the root of masculinity under patriarchy is insecurity. In truth, patriarchy gives men precious few tools to solve every type of problem, dictating that men must always become more callous and cruel and cold and selfish and oppressive and competitive and violent and angry because the feminine is evil. Women are the enemy, love is a lie, compassion is weakness, generosity is a scam, cooperation is for losers, empathy is a conspiracy, and having, acknowledging, admitting, expressing, or finding a healthy way to cope with emotions is girly and pathetic. Anything about you that is not fully masculine or causes you to be less of a real man, be it your thoughts, feelings, hobbies, personality traits, personal beliefs, loved ones, friends, children, partners, health, safety, and sanity, all must be discarded and completely destroyed, burned on the altar of patriarchy until the one, flawless, illusory, and unachievable ideal, the personification of human perfection, the real man, remains. Men conforming to one mindset, dedicated to maintaining this hierarchy, without question, ready to obey their social betters. Sounds lovely, doesn't it? And even though most people don't agree with all of this, or even most of this, it is still firmly established and wields influence over our every thought and action. At this point, it feels almost obscene to state what should be plainly obvious. That this ridiculous shroud is used in service of producing endless cannon fodder for war profiteers, or gears in the corporate profit machines, prison guards, cops, the enforcers of the status quo, wielding the monopoly of violence, as a new crop of old bigots bait their hooks and harvest their catch as fast as they can reel them in, all to feed the bloody gaping maw of the complete unavoidable climate apocalypse causing industrial mechanism of capitalist exploitation and imperialist war. The tragedy is that, above anyone else, feminists are consistently sympathetic to male pain, as only feminism offers solutions to the problems of patriarchy and the contradictory claims, unrealistic standards, and yes, incredibly toxic effects of patriarchal masculinity on men. Evangelists of patriarchy profit from male pain. They fuel a scourge of broken, angry men with no outlet for their pain, except for the snake oil they sell, both in useless products and advice, coupled with the reactionary anti-feminist political ideologies that benefit the ruling class while dividing the working class, shaming and blaming men for not being masculine enough to handle the pain, encouraging them to stifle, deny, or hide it, telling them to never admit they need, much less ask for help, teaching them to never trust or even ridiculing anyone offering them compassion, no matter how much this hurts men, no matter how many lives it costs. The problems facing men today are rooted in both capitalism and patriarchy. So how is it that socialist feminism is not more commonly looked to as the solution? It has been feminists, not men's rights activists or the manosphere, that have fought for change that has given men breathing room to be themselves in opposition to the suffocating oppression of patriarchal masculinity. It was feminists that pushed for an amendment to end all gender discrimination, vehemently opposed by anti-feminists. It was feminists who changed the legal definition of rape to include male victims. It was feminists that argued to the U.S. Supreme Court that an all-male draft was gender discrimination against men. It was feminists that fought the stigma behind and created support for male victims of sexual violence and domestic abuse. It was feminists that championed men interested in stereotypically feminine careers, hobbies, skills, duties, and responsibilities. Yet so much of this was done by women on behalf of men, And there's so much more to understand and accomplish, oppressive forces to expose, ignorance to overcome, so many places for feminists, especially male feminists, to be champions of male liberation rather than regressive, reactionary bigots acting as tools for male supremacy. Feminism is simply the belief in gender equality, the rejection of strict hierarchy with static, binary gender roles based on sexist stereotypes realized through both personal prejudice and systemic oppression. And feminism is the only ideology that allows men to be fully human, regardless of how well they fit whatever is currently associated with patriarchal masculinity. As I see it, feminism is the last, best hope for male pain, granting men the permission they never actually needed to admit and talk about and heal in a healthy and egalitarian way, fully supported by and in community with others, without judgment or risk of losing their status as a so-called real man. Feminism has been sympathetic to male pain as a mere byproduct of fighting for gender equality, even when its focus was on women's liberation. It is clear men need to liberate themselves from the chains of patriarchal masculinity, because as women are less subjugated and see less benefits from playing the role of men under patriarchy, and the ways they continue to be harmed are evident. The only benefits systems of exploitation like patriarchy can offer come at the expense of the oppressed. Thus, men must choose liberation for all or attempt to restore the benefits of patriarchy once offered men by declaring war on women's rights. It is a war men would lose. Patriarchy cannot liberate men. It can only give them more power and freedom when compared to the women it subjugates, all while distracting from the overwhelming oppressive force of capitalism and preventing the solidarity needed for revolutionary democratic change. Only feminism can free men from the ways patriarchy harms them, and only intersectional socialist feminism offers liberation from all forms of oppression.